I have a video, a segment of a video I want to play that with an interview I had with Jerm and Nell of Cape Town, South Africa. And we're going to do this in 3 segments, just a segment of it today and a segment the next time we get together in terms of our broadcast. And I thought it was a very interesting interview. Several years ago, we put out one video that got over 5 million views in South Africa. Our videos are kind of parsed out. I don't get all the credit for people who take our videos and then run them on their own site. But here is Jeremy Nell.
If Nelson Mandela couldn't save South Africa, if Dr. King's work and whatever else is going on in America right now, and we've got perhaps one of the worst racial conditions going on. We got hatred between the races. We got poverty off the charts. We got 1 out of every black man don't have a job. We got 70 to 80% of every woman don't have a man, but she got children, leading households. There's something wrong somewhere. There's something wrong somewhere. Now, to beat that old dead horse and say that the white man is doing it, that is the silliest, most asinine, foolish thing I've ever heard. Because if you say 70 to 80% of every homes are headed by women and not by men, and to say the white man is the reason for that, if you believe that, you might as well just give up. Because essentially what you're saying, we can't beat the white man. He's too much for us. We can't beat him. We tried, we marched on him, we cussed him out, but he's still beating us. Every time we turn around, he's beating us. He keeps us down in the gutter. He keeps us running away from us. The white man keeps beating us. We can't beat him. It's the white man that's holding us down, is what you're saying. You're giving him credit. Because obviously, I don't think you're crazy. If he wasn't holding you down, you wouldn't volunteer to be down. So what you're saying, black man, is you're saying that the white man is better than you.
Whew. My name is Jerm. This is Jerm Warfare, the Battle of Ideas. It's very cold in Cape Town at the moment. I have a rum with me to warm me up, but after listening to Pastor James Manning, I think I'm already warm. Welcome, Pastor.
Jeremy, thank you for having me today. I'm delighted to be on your broadcast.
When you hear yourself like that, does it fire you up? Does it stir anything inside of you?
I don't know. I suppose I have some mixed emotions because in the moment, I'm not necessarily always cognizant of exactly how I'm delivering. I know what's in my heart. I know what I want to say. You know, I want to say stop the bitching and moaning is basically what black people do about their relationship with white people for umpteen years. I know I want to say that, and I want to confront them with the truth, Jeremy, that they don't get from anybody else that's in, you know, the whole genre of leading black people. So that's what's in my heart. But how it comes out, sometimes I'm amazed at my passion that gets boiling as I get going. So I'm not sure I put very much credit in church. Though I'm a pastor, I'm not sure I give the church any leadership or credibility for being able to solve any of today's problems. That is not to say that the word of God or that Jesus is inadequate for the problem. It's just that the people representing right now are so far away from truth that they are worthless. And I can understand if you don't go to a church. I can definitely understand that. But I think that the other reason is that you don't see the passion is mainly because if you know you're lying and you're not delivering the truth, you probably can't be as passionate about that as perhaps you should. That might be one reason, but it's certainly not the end all of the be all of end all. I'm in Harlem, right? I'm in the Soweto, if you will, of New York City and America. And I prophesied that this, of course, being the flagship of all so-called black people. Now, I'm not always crazy about the term black either. That's another thing, but we can get into that a little bit later on. But God has named this community ATLAH, meaning all the land anointed holy, And that righteousness, Jeremy, is the only thing that's going to solve the problems that exist between the races. And so ATLAH, that's the acronym for all the land of Lord.
What is the history of ATLAH and, of course, your church? I think it goes all the way back to the 1950s, if I remember.
Yeah, well, the church was established by a pastor in 1957 who, when the heroin craze was just beginning to take deep root here in America, and a drug addict said up to him that you'd better be the light, to serve the community. He later passed. I was ordained to take charge of the ministry. And the term ATLAH was born 30 years ago, looking at the epidemic of racism problems, the fact that many of the solutions that had been tendered, the Dr. King marches, the Black Panthers, the Islamic Malcolm X, and all that crowd, it all failed, if you will, and failed miserably at solving the problem. God spoke to me about just calling for righteousness, and mainly, Jeremy, that all the movements, if you go back as far as the 1920s with the advent of people like W.E. Du Bois, who was probably the first Harvard graduate with a PhD, who was partially, if not 70% communist, and against America for that matter. And then through that process, it came at the end of the what was called the great period of famine here in America, was the civil rights movement with 1950 with Dr. King. And none of those have looked at the fact that the problem is within Black people themselves, their own ethics, their own morals, their own failure to interpretate their problems and to interpretate it squarely, and more specifically, to understand or to look at their competitiveness to white, if you will, the white world going back several centuries. For instance, I was at Oxford several years ago, and the place where I was speaking had been built in the 12th century, and it was made out of stone, big stone walls, stone buildings, and it was still standing after being built in the 12th century. And yet I was also in Liberia, and there's not a stone building there. And we're talking about in the 20th century that they haven't yet built anything of that structure. Yeah. So when you compare, the advancement and development of planet Earth by the races, the so-called Black man is far behind, and he needs to look at that and ask the question, why? Because when he had Africa all by himself, he did nothing in terms of the structure of the things that he claims that he likes and he wants to express, and that are certainly trademarks of building great civilizations. He's not done that. Now, it's not that he can't do it. I didn't say that. But he hasn't done it, and he won't tell himself that. And so that's probably where my passion comes from. I've been to Pretoria, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Mutapastad, Soweto. Yeah.
When was that? Was it during apartheid is what I'm asking, or after?
No, apartheid was still in vogue. The 5 pillars of apartheid was still in vogue. Nelson Mandela was still at Robben Island or someplace associated with Robben. He had not been. It was before 1990, whatever it is he was released. It was in 1982, 83, somewhere thereabouts. I think when Bishop Tutu had just won the Nobel Prize for Peace. The same year I attended, that I spent some time in South Africa. And America is highly developed in terms of its cities, and to some degree, its rural areas. There are some areas that are impoverished in some ways, but when you look at the places that are mainly inhabited by Black people en masse, they are generally still third world in many regards, even though they have access to American infrastructure. The way in which the neighborhoods are maintained. For instance, I haven't preached this very often lately, but I would preach that Black people have a poor relationship with property. They tend to tear it up rather than maintain it. I mean, when they took over Harlem, it had been built by the Dutch in great, Art Deco architects, and the buildings were really beautiful buildings. They tore them up. I mean, they just literally massacred the buildings, and that's a problem. That's a real problem with having a relationship and understanding of development of property. And so everywhere they go, they turn it into a ghetto, if you will. And by the way, Jeremy, I don't say any of these things with a lot of joy and rejoicing in my heart that I say these. I think a lot of people misunderstand me. That somehow or another I'm gleeful about all this, that I'm loving it up. I'm not. That's not what's going on with me. I'm just telling you, everybody knows that Harlem is a ghetto of the South Central Los Angeles. Listen, leading people like Jesse Jackson said he wouldn't walk down the streets of Harlem at 2 o'clock in the morning. And if he heard footsteps behind him, he hoped they were white people, not black people, because, you know what black folk do to one another. And it's true. And again, but I don't want anybody to think I'm rejoicing. I take delight in saying these things. I don't. It's just truth, that's all.
You were born in North Carolina.
That is correct.
And you picked cotton, is that right?
That is correct also. I did.
My word, that is a very stereotypical upbringing for a black American.
I think that anyone who's never picked cotton, and we've moved from that era of humans picking cotton over the past 50, 60 years, it is an experience within itself that is classic. And I did it, but not just myself. My mother did it. All my siblings did it. And we were paid $3 for 100 pounds of cotton. We got paid only $3. So you imagine cotton's very light. To get 100 pounds of that stuff, you got to pick a lot of it. And it's picked in the hot sun. And I did it mostly on my knees because the cotton stalk only grows up to about a little bit above your knees and below your waist, so to either bend over or you get down on your knees where it's easier to pick it. I did that, yeah.
I can immediately begin to understand why there would be an animosity from black people towards white people. I mean, that seems like an unbelievably horrible upbringing.
No, it was the tenor of the times. I think it was. It could certainly induce a lot of animosity to have to live like that. I think the general way of expressing that is we were sharecroppers. That is to say, we were one doorstep removed from slavery. That is to say, once slavery was absolutely outlawed and you couldn't enforce it anymore, the way black people lived in the same land area that they were once slaves on, they worked the same land, but they got a share of what the profits were at the end of the year. And by that, I might add a meager share. So the term sharecropper became a very prominent and dominant term. But yeah, it can produce and has produced and continues to produce a lot of angst. Growing up, Jeremy, in North Carolina, under Jim Crow, for the first 18 years of my life, and segregation and all that whole colored, if you will, event, I didn't have anger towards white folk. I didn't. I mean, I just didn't. I lived, we did what we did. But then I came to New York, and at the time, it was in the mid-'60s. The Vietnam War was just getting underway. Civil rights movement. Dr. King had his march on Washington in 1963. Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael and the Black Panthers, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, they were just making known their national, if you will, appeal for Black power. Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X were in tandem in terms of they had, prior to my arriving in New York City, had spread the Nation of Islam that all white people are devils. So when I came to New York as an impressionable 18-year-old, I became, if you will, radicalized. And then I began to have this hatred and indifference towards white people as a result of all that was what was going on culturally in the social society. And but I was still, because of my work ethics, I was able to get married, go to college, get a decent job. And for the first 4 or 5 years in New York, I did well. But that anger grew to the point where I quit my job and I didn't know what I was going to do when I left and I worked for corporate America, by the way. I worked for a major multinational blue chip corporation as an executive. But then I started breaking into homes. Actually, I tell you, I mean, I started breaking into mainly Jewish homes because I thought that I was looking for jewelry. I wasn't looking for televisions, or silver or anything. But I had this understanding that Jewish men bought their wives a lot of jewelry, diamonds and golds, and so I particularly looked for those neighborhoods to break into, and I did it all. I did it in Florida. I did it in Miami Beach. I did it in Long Island. I mean, and I did pretty good too, by the way. I mean, I'm not proud of that, and I apologize. I repent for having done it, but that's what I did, and I ended up in prison, by the way.
And then you became a Christian.
Yeah, I did in prison. I realized I'd thrown away so much because I had a beautiful life. I left my wife and children. I abandoned them like typical black men do. And in prison, I recognized that I'd given up so much and disappointed so many people. And I asked the Lord Jesus if he would take that burden of pain from me of what I had done, because I looked back over those few years of my life and they were so ugly. I just wanted to get rid of the pain of all the people I hurt and disappointed. And Jesus saved me. I there in prison. And so I've been there ever since. I've been preaching for him. I just got indoctrinated when I came from the South. Did not indoctrinate me to hate white folk. And I'm still a little hesitant and reticent about actually making that as a blanket statement. I think what I experienced when I left my job and started doing crime was to somehow to relate and try to help the black man, because I figured, well, I can do this or that or the other. It wasn't the kind of hatred, Jeremy, that I actually see. When I talk to black men or I talk to black people in general, I look into their eyes and I listen to what they say. There's a deep hatred that deeper than there are black men that hate white folk deeper than they can love a woman. I can tell you that now. I've been around them all my life, Jeremy. I am not, but I don't have that. That's not what I have. And I didn't have it then, but it ended me in prison, what I did have.
I want to ask you to come up close for just 1 second. And I want to talk to 3-year and older veterans of the Trust in the Lord Hour, the Open Rewards Prayer Meeting, the Manna Report, and the Pulpit of Power, those 4 ministries that we do every week, producing at least 20 different ministries or sermons every week. If you are a 3-year or older veteran, by old I mean 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, 12 years, older veteran of any of these ministries that we do on a daily basis every week, and you are not a supporter, you've not joined with the ministry to give to pledge your support and your alignment with what we've been teaching. My question is why? You've had 3 years to observe us. You've had 3 years to listen to us on a daily basis, all weekend, all day long, any hour of the day. We're broadcasting. You've had 3 years to watch our various successes. You've 3 years to watch our ups and downs. You've had 3 years to listen to the tenor or the consistency of what we have said, whether we are consistent or whether we're all over the chart in what we do and what we believe. You've had 3 years to watch people around us who have made the commitment to join with our ministry in church and to financially support it. And by the way, I want to give another shout out to Brother Jesse Munoz out there in San Bernardino, along with Goldfinger, who is just extraordinary giver, and others that do extraordinary giving to our ministry. My question is to you, if you are a 3-year veteran or older, why haven't you joined? Why haven't you committed? And I suppose some of the reasons would say, well, Pastor Man, I belong to another church. And why? How could you, after 3 years of hearing me teach about the Sabbath, about righteousness, about the tribulation, and listen to me faithfully as you do, and still go sit up in another pastor's face? How could you be? It's like a woman sleeping with 2 men. One she likes during the week and the other she likes on the weekend. It's hypocritical. How could you do that? I mean, essentially, you started 3 months ago. I can understand. Well, it may take you some time to evaluate. It may take you some time to look at me, to discover, who I am. You say, well, Pastor, that's not that I don't belong to another church or ministry. I'm with you. But there's some things you say I like, and there's some things you say I don't like. Why? why is it that you've made a decision that there's some things that you don't like are stronger than the things that you do like? I am not a psychiatrist, but I am an analyst. And I have to tell you, I analyze the world, understanding. The understanding and wisdom tells me this, that if there are things that a person such as myself that I am saying, there is no room to disagree with what I am saying unless your purpose is to find something to disagree with. Let's say, for instance, you say, well, I like the fact that you talk about Obama, but I don't like the fact that you talk about Trump. Let's say, for instance, you're one of those, right? Well, the purpose, it isn't that you just like what I say about Obama, but don't like what I say about Trump. What it is that you are looking for a reason to support Trump. It isn't that you don't like it. It's just that you don't like the fact that I'm saying something about him. It isn't that what I'm saying is wrong. Let me put it that way. It isn't what I'm saying is wrong or indifferent. You know it's right. But you've lived your life, or you've come up, or you've been raised with a doctrine that you can really live in a false reality. That's where you are. You've been raised in a doctrine that you can live in a false reality. That is to say, you can like the truth about Obama, but you don't like the truth about Trump. And it's the same truth. It's the same truth. There's no difference. But because you have been indoctrinated to live in a false reality, you are really a person who needs psychological debriefing. But trust me, there are zillions of people around the world who live that way. There are people who know what I'm saying about Trump or Obama is right. They know it. But they choose to ignore it based on the fact that they find a reality that isn't true, and they've settled in there. Say, that's one of the reasons why I've not made a commitment, because, I don't like the fact, I wish you would support what I support. But the truth of the matter is, then why do you come? You've given 3 years or more of your life to listen to me? 3 years of your life to listen to me? And you're not tired of listening to me yet? And you've given 3 years of your life, and over the past 3 years, your life has been greatly upgraded. You've learned, you've been educated, you've been enlightened. And let me say this to you. If you make the commitment, say, well, Pastor, I'm joining with you, and I'm going to support, I'm going to do the tithe and offering, I'm going to do the first fruit, I'm going to keep the Sabbath, your life is going to soar. Now listen to me very carefully, and I'm not going to leave you alone after this. Listen to me very carefully. You come as often as you come over the past 3 years because you're being helped. You're being educated. You're being enlightened, right? Right. But the thing that you like, whether you say, well, I like what you say about Obama, but I don't like what you say about Trump. You do the same thing with the Word of God, such as you like the things I say, the teachings that I say, the way I explain the Bible, the way I break it all down and make it clear. But when it comes to things like money or tithing and offering or the Sabbath, well, that is also true, but because of your false reality, because you really need a psychological debriefing, because of your false reality, you choose not to believe the tithe or the first fruit or the Sabbath. Now, it isn't that it isn't true. It's as true as all the other things I've said. But you live in a false reality where you try to ignore the truth about the tithe, and so you don't do it. But everything else I say is good to go. Everything I ever say is good to go, good enough to share with your friends. It makes you laugh. It educates you. It enlightens you. But the tithe, well, and the full commitment to the ministry, well, the first fruit offerings, well, the Sabbath, that's all true as well. But you have chosen, and you've been raised and indoctrinated to have a dual reality, which is dangerous. Jesus said this, and I'll leave you. He said, I would rather you be either hot or cold, but not lukewarm. You're lukewarm. You have a dual reality. He said, if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. I would rather you be completely stomped down against Pastor Manny, trying to take him down. Be fully against him. Be against him with all of your strength. Or be fully for him with all of your strength. But don't be in the middle, somewhere lukewarm. You're better than to be spit out of the mouth of Jesus if you're lukewarm. So what's it going to be? You're going to make the commitment and grow and be even better blessed, or you're going to continue to walk in the lukewarm spit of the mouth of the Savior. I'm James David Manning, everybody. I'm the Lord's servant.